Welcome to the next edition of BriefingsDirect. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator. Solving tactical challenges around data center security can often unlock strategic data center operations benefits. For a large metropolitan borough council in South Yorkshire, England, an initial move to thwarting recurring ransomware attacks ended up a catalyst to wider infrastructure performance, cost, operations, and management benefits. This next BriefingsDirect Security Innovations discussion examines how the Information and Communications Technology team at Barnsley Metropolitan Borough Council rapidly deployed malware protection across 3,500 physical and virtual workstations and servers. Here to share the story of how one change in security software led to, a year later, a far higher level of user satisfaction and a heightened appreciation for the role and impact of IT is Stephen Furness, Information and Communications Technology Technical Specialist for Infrastructure at Barnsley Borough Council. Welcome to BriefingsDirect, Stephen.
Hi there, thank you.
Tell us about the Barnsley Metropolitan Borough. You're one of 36 metropolitan counties in England. You have a population of 240,000. Tell us a little bit more about what it is that your government agencies provide to those citizens.
Realistically, as a council, we provide a wide-ranging services to all the citizens here, from things like refuse collection on a weekly basis. We have to make sure we can do that. Maintaining roads, potholes, all that kind of stuff. Making sure that we look after the vulnerable that we've got in society around here. There's a big raft of things that we've got to deliver, and every year we're always challenged to deliver those same services, but actually with less money from central government. So it does make our job harder, because then there's not just a squeeze across, a specific department in the council when we have these pressures. There's a squeeze across everything, including IT. And I guess one of our challenges has always been, how do we deliver more or the same standard of service to our end users with less budget? So a lot of that we then start to turn into products that provide single panes of glass interfaces to make the actual management and configuration of things a lot easier for us, and things that are more intuitive, and things that have got automation is one of the big things to try and drive, making everything that we do easier and simpler for us as an IT service.
Sure, it suppose boils down to working smarter, not harder, but you need to have the right tools and technology to do that. So you have a fairly small team, 115 or so, supporting 2,800 plus users, and you have to be responsible for all aspects of IT, the servers, the network, storage, and of course, security. Does having that sort of small team common approach to overall security help, or is it a hindrance? Is it better to be small and fleet, or would you think that a distributed approach to security would be better?
I think in some instances, we're even smaller than that. In IT, for us, we've got around 150 people, and that doesn't just cover security or infrastructure. That's the whole piece of IT, from applications all the way across. Just in our own infrastructure team, we're only around 13 people in that team. And our security team that we've got that's separate to that, there's only about 3 or 4 people in that team. So it can become a bit of a hindrance when you get overwhelmed with security incidents or issues that need resolving. But then sometimes it's great to have that, that small team of people that you can bond with, and you can actually come up with real good solutions to resolve your issues.
Well, clearly with that smaller group, you have to be very automation-minded, and you have to be thinking about solving problems quickly, or, of course, your end users will be awfully disappointed. Tell us a little bit about your journey from where you were with security approximately a year and a half ago, and what's changed in the biggest picture.
I guess from probably a year and a half ago, the issues that we were sort of stuck in a different mindset back then. We kind of looked at the existing security product that we were using, and then every year we kind of went through this process of saying, okay, we're up for renewal. Where can we get the same product for a cheaper price, or the best price that we can get it for? What we never did in the past was think about things like, what issues are we getting the most? What are the new technologies that are coming out, and the new products that can actually mitigate all these issues and make our jobs, especially being a smaller team, a lot easier. So we kind of had a bit of a mindset change about 12, 18 months back, where we made a decision to actually say, you know what, we want to make our lives easier. Let's have a think about what's important to us from a security product. What issues have we been having that potentially the new products that are out there can actually mitigate and make our jobs more easier, especially with us being a smaller team.
Was the reoccurring ransomware attacks something that was perhaps the last straw that broke the camel's back, or was there something else that precipitated this change of mind?
No, I think we've been sort of suffering with ransomware attacks in the past. Every couple of years we would actually end up, some user would be duped into clicking a file or an email or something that would then cause chaos and mayhem across the network, infecting file shares, and not just that individual user's file share, but potentially file shares that we've got, 700-800 users all at once suddenly find that the files have all been encrypted. And then from an IT perspective, we're then having to restore from the previous backups that we've got of those files, which obviously takes time, especially when you start talking terabytes of data that you're having to revert back to. So I guess kind of that was one of the issues that we're getting, and it seemed to be with the previous security solutions that we had in place. The vendor would come to us and say, all right, you've got this particular version of malware, of ransomware. Here's some settings to configure and you won't get that again, which is great for that particular variant, but then doesn't help us when the next version of it does something slightly different and the product doesn't detect it. So we were kind of, that was one of our real worries and pains that we suffered from. Every so often when the new version came out, we were going to potentially get hit with it. And so kind of change that mindset of saying we want something that's actually going to be able to do things like machine learning and have all that ransomware protection built into it, so that we're not in that position and we can actually get on with the day-to-day job and be more proactive than being reactive in the environment. And that's one of the big things for us.
Yeah.
That, along with we've got lots of certifications, accreditations that we've got to meet standards for, being a government authority, to be able to connect back to the central government of the UK for various things like pensions and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of things there that would get picked up and say, well, actually, your AV, we actually managed to sneak something through last time when we did a penetration test on your network, and we think you need to think about changing stuff.
So you really did have to go from a tactical approach to security to this enterprise security mindset. So let's go back to your thought process. You had a recurring malware and ransomware issues. You had an audit problem, and you needed to do more with less. Tell us a little bit about where you went from that point to getting to a much better place.
So as a local authority, what we have to do with anything that's sort of largest purchase, so anything usually over £2,500 UK pounds, we have to go through a tender process. So basically we write in what our requirements are, what we want to get out from whatever products that we're going to get, and that goes onto a tender website, and companies then bid for the actual work. They actually have to write in how their product meets our requirements and also list costings, etc. It's a process that's nothing for me to be involved in. I'm purely involved in the actual techie side of things, so the deployment of stuff and managing and looking after the kit. That's all done separately by our procurement team. So we pushed out this tender for new security product that we wanted, and obviously we got responses from various different companies, including BitDefender. And basically when we then looked at doing the scoring of that, we tend to work on the features and functionality that we require as being the sort of high marks. So 70% of whatever the scoring was in that particular tender process is based on the features and functionality, with 30% then based on the actual cost of the product. For us, which was really interesting, BitDefender scored the highest on all the features and functionalities. Everything that we put down as a must-have was a big tick box from them. And then when we looked at the actual costs involved that they were going to charge us to actually procure their software and also provide us with deployment with their consultancy, it came out at half of what we were actually paying for our previous product the previous year.
Yeah.
I wish that we'd actually done this a long time ago, because we could have saved money as well as got a better product.
And you had been familiar with BitDefender because it's what you ended up using in your home system.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I think it was my wife or something like that. I think she had something on her phone, some malware we got on there, and we started then looking. Okay, let's secure your device, and let's have a look at what we're actually running on our personal devices at home. And I came up with BitDefender as one of the best products after I had a really good look around at different options out there. So I went and bought a family pack for it. So effectively, I deployed BitDefender at home on my own personal mobile, my wife's, my kids, on their tablets, on their computers in the house, what they use for doing schoolwork on. And it's been great at protecting protecting us from anything. We've never had any issues with getting an infection or any malware or anything like that at home. So it was quite interesting to suddenly find out, once we actually were told who'd actually won the tender process, that it was BitDefender, because I didn't even know at that stage who was actually in the running for, who'd actually presented a response to the tender process. So it was interesting when the guys came to me and said, right, we're going to be deploying BitDefender. It's like, oh yeah, I use those at home, and they're really good. So.
And Stephen, what was the sort of mindset, the attitude for your end users around their experiences with their workstations, with performance, with degradation when it came to making things not even entirely secure? What was their sort of attitude that you had to wrestle with?
Yeah, we had big problems with end users logging service desk calls to us in the past, where what we had on our previous security product was a weekly scan that would run on the device. So we would scan the entire hard drive every Friday, I think it was, around lunchtime. With all these products, you're always trying to identify when the sort of quiet periods are where you can actually run sort of an end user scan on their machine. And we'd come up with Friday, potentially lunchtime. In the council, we have a flexibility of when we can take our lunch between 12 and 2 p.m. So we'd kick it off at 12 and hope that it would kind of finish in time for when potentially users needed to come back and actually do some work on the devices. And with the previous product, that kind of, no matter what we did, try and change dates, try and change times, we couldn't get anything that would work in a quick time frame and complete the scans really rapidly. They could be running for 2 to 3 hours, taking high resources on their devices. And a lot of that was down to, the actual spec of the end user devices not being very good. But again, when you're constrained with budgets, etc., you can only put so much resource into buying kit for your users. So kind of we would end up with service desk calls, people complaining, saying, is there any chance you can change the date and time of the scan? My device is running slow, can I have a new device? So there were lots of complaints we would get there. And then we would also notice, usually Monday morning, we would have server scans running at the weekend, but also the weekend was when we would tend to do our full backup. So we'd have the two things kind of clashing with each other, causing issues. And Monday morning we'd come in expecting the backups to have completed, but because they were trying to fight with the scanning that was going off, neither of them had fully completed. So we were then worried again, if we have an outage now, when are we going to be able to recover back to the previous week potentially? So our backups would end up running longer and longer in the day as the scans took longer with more files on there. So yeah, a bit painful for us in the past.
All right, well, you went through a structured procurement process, and a familiar name came up with BitDefender. Tell us about what happened in terms of deployment and what the experience was in order to get you to a much better place.
Deployment was an interesting one for us and a really, really good experience. In the past, we've had suppliers that will come along and we're putting in their product. They'll provide us a deployment document of some description, and it'll be their standard document. There'll be nothing customized. They won't have spoken to us to find out what's actually deployed on the ground, where and how can their product fit in. It'll just be, I need X, Y, Z, and we're going to deploy it like this. And we would then have issues trying to get things working properly, with then having to go backwards and forwards with the third party to get things resolved. In this instance, we had BitDefender's consultants came on site to us, see us, and we had a really good meeting discussion. And the difference there was they were asking the questions of, can you tell us about your environment and what have you got and where have you DMZs and how does this work, and what applications you've got deployed, what systems you're using, what hypervisor platforms have you got. And all that information was then taken into account in the design document that they then customised completely to meet what we got and to best fit their best practice. So at that point, we ended up with something that we could actually deploy ourselves if we wanted to. We didn't do that. We took their consultancy as part of the deployment process, and we had the guys on site for a couple of days working with us to actually build the actual infrastructure servers to run Gravity Zone. And it was really well. There was nothing that was missed from the design. They gave us all the ports and firewall rules that were needed, and it went really, really smoothly. We initially thought we were going to have a problem with deploying out to the clients, but then we worked with the guys, the consultants, to actually come up with a way around impacting our end users with the deployment.
So how did that automation work in terms of uninstalling the old, bringing in the new, updating it, patching it, getting it all in ship shape?
Yeah, well, one of our big worries was that when you deploy BitDefender, the first thing it does is checks to see if there's a competitive vendor's product on the machine. If it finds that product, it will try and remove it. And once it's removed the product, if it can do that, it will then restart the user's device and then continue its installation. Now, that was going to be a bit of a concern to us if we just pushed it out without anything extra in there. So basically, we came up with some scripted solution that we could push out through SCCM. And what that did is we ran the uninstall commands for the third-party product that we'd already got on there. That removed it, and then BitDefender, because it's been removed at that point, when that was triggered for the install, it just continued straight away. The devices didn't need rebooting, and we didn't impact any of our end users at all. They didn't even know there was anything happening from a change perspective. The only thing they would have, if they'd have been eagle-eyed and been able to spot it, would to see like the little icon in the taskbar changing from the previous vendor's icon to BitDefender. So it was really smooth, the actual way that we got the automation to run and push out the client to our end users, and they just didn't know.
And tell me, Stephen, what was the impact on the servers? You mentioned you were having some interference with backup. Has there been an improvement in terms of lightweight agents' ability to do more with your virtual machines? How has the server impact gone? Yeah,
our server impact has been completely changed from what we used to have. The scanning that BitDefender does, the way that it does the scans, initially it will want to do a full scan of your device, which might take 15 minutes or something like that, which again is far, far less time than we were talking 2 to 3 hours or even more on some of the big file servers that we used to have. And then once it's done that, we've currently got set up now, I think every day it does another quick scan, and the quick scan is over within about 3 minutes. It's completed its quick scan. So that impact of how long and the resource utilization of the scanning has just totally changed the environment. And because we use virtualization predominantly in our infrastructure, we've even gone down the route of deploying the BitDefender scan servers. And what these allow us to do is have a separate scan server on each of our hosts that we run. And that is doing offloading of all the scanning of files and malware and that kind of stuff. So it's a lightweight agent. It takes up less memory, less footprint and less resources on the actual servers. And all the scanning is offloaded to the slightly beefier scan servers that we run. So the impact from a server perspective, you don't see sudden spikes in CPU or memory utilization or any of that at all. And our backups, we don't have any issues with that kind of thing anymore. So really, really great to see, a vendor coming up with a solution to issues that people seem to have across the board.
Has that impacted your utilization and ability to get the most virtual machines per CPU, or how has that impacted?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that these boxes that we run, these VMs aren't taking up as much resources means that we're not getting all these spikes happening left, right, and centre across the virtualization platform, and therefore we can squeeze in more VMs per host without an issue. So it is good from that perspective because it means we can actually get more bang for us buck, if you like.
All right. When you have a mixed environment, and I'm sure you do, as I understand, you have Nutanix hyperconverged. You've got a mixture of Hyper-V and vSphere environments for your hypervisors, some Citrix Xen server. It sounds like you have a mix of virtual desktops and physical desktops. How does managing heterogeneity of that nature with a common security approach work? It sounds like that could be kind of a mess.
You would think it could be a mess, but from our perspective, Gravity Zone is really good because I've got this single pane of glass. It hooks into Active Directory, so it pulls back everything that's in there. I can see all the devices at once. It hooks into our Nutanix AHV environment. I can deploy more scan servers into the environment directly from Gravity Zone. So it'll automatically, if I suddenly decide I need an additional scan server, it'll automatically build that scan server in the virtual environment for me, and it's another box then that we've got for scanning everything on the virtual servers. So it's nice that it hooks into various different things. We currently got some legacy VMware stuff. It lets me see what's in that environment. We don't use the NSX platform in VMware, so it doesn't integrate as tightly as it could do, but that just gives me that visibility of an older platform that I'm looking to move away from to get everything across to Nutanix AHV. So it makes jobs easier for us, and When we then look at the additional modules that we've got in there, so we've got patch management is one of the big things for us. One of the issues that we always have had in the past has been we've been really good at keeping our Windows updates on devices and servers, etc., up to the latest level. But where we tend to have the biggest problem is the visibility of third-party apps such as Adobe Reader and Flash and all these other ones, Java, that are on devices. So you kind of get lost as to what is out there unless you do some kind of active scanning across your entire infrastructure. And what the patch management does allows us to actually see where we've got different versions on client devices. It allows us to patch them up to the latest level and install the latest versions. So from that perspective, that's really good because it's one product again that I'm actually using, one pane of glass, but I'm getting so much benefit and extra features and functionality out of it than I did previously in the other products that we use.
And Stephen, you mentioned the total cost of ownership benefit when it came to the server utilization and the increased VMs. Is there another economic metric here when it comes to administration? You have a small number of people, 13 overall. Do you see a payback in terms of this administration and an integration value?
I do, yeah. I mean, again, we've only got 13 people in the infrastructure team, but probably of those 13 people, there's probably only 2 or 3 of us that are actively going into the actual Gravity Zone platform and doing anything in there. And on a day-to-day, we don't tend to have to do that much. If we deploy a new system, we might have to monitor it and see if there's anything that's needed for adding as an exception, if there's some funky application or something that's not kind of a Microsoft standard or whatever that's on there that needs an exception to allow a particular executable or process to run. But other than that, once our applications are deployed and our servers are up and running, we don't tend to have to make any real changes in there. Or the only things we're kind of doing is looking at patch levels of stuff that's third party, or we're checking to see are there any issues on our endpoints that we need to be aware of. Is anything it's not updated, or there's a problem with it, or there's something that's there that just needs our attention. So the actual amount of time that we actually need to be in that console is quite reduced now, and again it's reduced for a small number of people, so it's really useful to us.
Well, maybe we put the cart in front of the horse, because we've been talking about how a security change impacts your infrastructure costs, your labor costs, your operational efficiency. But we also, of course, need to be concerned about how well it secures your systems. So let's put the horse in front of the cart. What's been the result in this last year that you've had this running in terms of the main goal, which is to be free of security concerns?
Well, for us, that's just been the crux of it. We haven't had any malware, any ransomware attacks on our network. We've not had to spend days, weeks, hours restoring files back or anything like that, or rebuilding hundreds of machines because it's got something on it. So that's been a good thing. But the interesting thing for us was that pretty much from day one of actually deploying this, we started looking at the reports of things that it had actually found, and we were finding stuff that had been sat in people's email in their OST files for the last 5, 6, 7 years that was a piece of malware or some sort of virus that sat there. And the weird thing is that our previous security product had never even seen this stuff. It had obviously let it through to start with, and it had got through all our filtering and everything, and it was sat in somebody's mailbox ready if they decided to go and actually I'll go and look at this old email and click on it and launch it. Oops, I've infected the network. So that was a really interesting thing to actually see straight away from day one, that it was actually detecting stuff that was sat dormant for years in people's mailboxes that we just didn't even know about. So from that perspective, it's been fantastic. We've not had any security outbreaks that we've had to deal with or anything like that. And an interesting thing, just recently we've had our security audit from our penetration testers. One of the things they try and do is actually put some malware onto a test device, and they came back and said, we haven't been able to do that. You've passed with flying colours. We've been unable to infect this device with anything that we've got. So that's been a really, really good thing from our perspective.
And how is that translated into the perception from your end users and your overseers, those people that are, looking to manage your budgets? And has there been a sense of getting more value from them? And what's the satisfaction quotient, if you will, from your end users?
I think from our end users, a really good positive one has been that they've not come back and said there's anything, that we've lost all the complaints about the machines being slow and all that kind of stuff. And I think we even had from one of our applications guys actually saying, have you changed something? Because my machine's actually running faster than it normally does on a Friday. And then when we explained to them that we'd swapped out the version of the security product on the device for BitDefender, it was like, okay, that's great, keep it up. I think from people higher up at the minute, I don't think they appreciate what we've actually done and where we've actually gone. I think that'll come in the next months as we then start presenting to them, like our security reports and the reports from the audit about how they were unable to infect an end user device. So it's kind of a bit hit and miss as to where it is. From our side, from IT, we're really, really pleased with it. We understand what it does and how much it's saving us from the pains of having to restore files and be one of these councils or entities that's suddenly plastered across the paper and reputation tarnished because you've suddenly lost all your systems and you've been infected with whatever. It's
easier to measure a lack of confidence than it is to be able to measure having confidence, but of course having a smoothly running organization is the payoff. Before we close out, what about the future? Do you feel that you've got a sense of comfort and a good posture with security that then will allow you to modernize your infrastructure, to think about doing things that you may have been, concerned about with security not being completely nailed down? And where would you like to see your security products go in terms of more intelligence, using data, and getting even further out in terms of that proactive benefit?
Yeah, I guess for us it's kind of like the future for us at the minute is we're looking to rationalise what we've got. So we're doing a lot now with virtualization. I think we've only got around 50 servers left that are now physical. So that's kind of the area that we're heading. We're thinking about the cloud journey. So again, the security product working with stuff that you've got up in the cloud is going to be the next big thing for us, as we want to try and secure that area of our environment. And if we start moving infrastructure servers up there, how do we do all that? So, yeah, I think security-wise, that's definitely one of the things that we're going to be starting to think about is, what can we do to protect stuff up in the cloud as well as tightening things up with what we've got here.
Now that you've got 20/20 hindsight with using this type of security environment over a course of a year, any advice for folks in a similar situation with thousands of end devices as well as servers? What advice would you give someone who's perhaps on the precipice of making a change?
I think from my perspective, it would be don't be scared of the change. I think one of the things that always used to worry me was, well, we know what we're doing with this particular vendor and we've used their products, we know what we're doing. Oh, and how difficult is it going to be to remove it from all the devices that we've got it deployed to? Don't worry about that. If you're getting the right product, it's going to take care of a lot of the issues that you've currently got. And as we found out from deploying the product, was actually relatively easy and didn't cause us any pain to our end users. It was seamless. They didn't even know we'd done that. So I guess some people might be thinking they've got a massive estate and it's going to be a real headache, but potentially with automation and a bit of thinking about how and what you're going to do, it's fairly straightforward to actually deploy a new antivirus product to your end users. I guess I would just say don't be afraid of the change and move into something new. It's get the best use of the products that you've got out there.
Well, very good. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. You've been listening to a sponsored BriefingsDirect discussion on how a large metropolitan borough in South Yorkshire, England, ended up with a recurring ransomware attack problem, but along the way gained wider infrastructure performance, cost benefits, operational benefits, and a happier overall organization. So please join me in thanking our guest. We've been talking with Stephen Furness. He's Information and Communications Technology Technical Specialist for Infrastructure at Barnsley Metropolitan Borough Council. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at InterArbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of BriefingsDirect use case discussions. A big thank you to our sponsor, BitDefender, for supporting these presentations. Lastly, thanks to our audience for joining, and please pass this along to our IT community, and don't forget to come back next time.